I've listened to people share over and over for years and years about how they are able to forgive incredible wrongs done to them. And I would say the thing I hear over and over again is that we can finally forgive others when we know deeply our own need for forgiveness.
From the Grit Institute, this is the Grit Factor podcast. And I'm Shannon Huffman-Colson, former Apache helicopter pilot, speaker, and author of The Grit Factor, Courage, Resilience, and Leadership in the most male-dominated organization in the world. I'm also the founder of the Grit Institute, where I help purpose-driven leaders like you build grit and resilience and connect with purpose so that you can navigate transitions, overcome challenges, and lead with impact in your work for a better world. Today, we have a truly extraordinary guest, someone whose life's work has been devoted to healing, community, and transformation. Killian Noe is the founder of Recovery Cafe, a sanctuary of radical hospitality for people navigating addiction, homelessness, and trauma. She is also the author of Descent into Love, a book that challenges us to embrace community not just for our own growth, but for the healing of a world in need. Killian's journey is one of deep faith, profound love, and unwavering commitment. She grew up in the South, the daughter of a Baptist minister, and later found herself in Tel Aviv, where she witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of conflict and the depths of both human hatred and human love. A divine calling led her to Seattle, where she formed the New Creation community, which ultimately gave birth to Recovery Cafe. Along the way, she has shaped a model of healing that is built on presence, accountability, and the belief that true transformation happens in relationship. Today, we'll dive into her story, the moments of awakening, the challenges of leadership, the importance of holding to our guiding principles, and the fine line between self-actualization and true service. We'll explore what it means to be fully present, how to cultivate loving accountability, and why the most loving thing isn't always the easiest thing. Killian Noe's wisdom is a gift, and this conversation will challenge you to think deeply about your own role in fostering healing in your life, your community, and the world. Let's take off.
You are so generous with yours to be here. It's really, thank you. I am recording mostly on leadership, grit and resilience, and purpose. And I will say that you come to mind for many reasons at many times, but certainly with all of these things, with your work with Recovery Cafe, but also as I was getting into Descent into Love as well. My goodness, you have just a really amazing story, and it's really beautiful, Killian. I don't think there's more important work that is to be done than what the work that you're doing.
Well, you're very kind and affirming, and I feel the same about you and learning about the faith community that you founded when you went there, and how much I would love to do an interview with you to hear all about that.
Well, maybe we can get you out to the Methow Valley at some point, and because I know people would love to hear from you.
I'd love to hear from you.
We feel very grateful. It's a wonderful fellowship, and it's been a real gift in our lives, and I hope in I think in many others. So we're but I will say it was really helpful for me, and I'm going to actually recommend to our community, because we sometimes will have a common read, because you put some structure around Descent into Love. I think you put some structure around community that's really important and strengthens it and develops it. And so that's one of the things I want to talk to you about today, because I think that's something that all organizations could really benefit from.
Well, thank you. I'm just now committed. I've just committed this week to writing a short book that will replace Descent into Love,
Ah,
just because a lot of the examples I used in that book were from our Seattle Recovery Cafe.
yes.
And now that we have 76 recovery cafes across the US, I really want to write something that reflects their story, more the stories of people in West Virginia and Florida and Indiana and all California, just as opposed to us. It feels too almost self centered almost to tell just the Seattle story.
Well, that should be part of what we talk about today too, because I think that is also this incredible story of, and quite unusual really, to be able to take something, to develop it, to structure it in a way that brings all of those values to the fore all of the time, and then be able to scale that is remarkable. It's truly remarkable. So we'll get to that. But is it okay with you if we back up to growing up?
I'm gonna be quiet. Let you lead.
No. All of this is
you
excellent.
tell me what you want me to reflect with you on.
Well, I think it's always interesting, and you have such an interesting background, especially living in Seattle, although you're doing this work everywhere, that you grew up in the South, really, and you grew up the daughter of a Baptist minister. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how that shaped you. It must have, with all of the things that you did in college and everything that you did to follow.
Well, thank you for that question and the opportunity to reflect a little bit about on my dad. My dad loved people, all people, and he had a profound influence on me. It was a different time. Wasn't such a divided time,
Right.
politically, and yet I think even if he was alive today, I think he would still find a way to cross those political divides, because he just loved people. And
Wow.
one of the things he used to do, and I was the fourth child, so I don't know why he didn't do this with my other siblings. But he used to take me with him to visit people in the hospital, or people who had just lost someone through death, or people who were grieving. He would take me on these pastoral calls with him as a little girl. And I remember one time he took me to visit this 90-something-year-old man. Mr. Williams was his name. He had just lost his wife of over 50 years. And she wasn't just his wife. She was the eyes through which he saw the world, because he was blind.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And I remember being there, visiting Mr. Williams, and my father said, would you like to say a prayer for Mr. Williams? And I remember thinking, what do I know about this man's suffering? I'm a little girl, but my dad used to do stuff like that. And I think he wanted me to connect with the suffering of people, suffering that was beyond anything that I had experienced in my very joyful little life at that time, living in the mountains of North Carolina, where things were somewhat simple. That were somewhat simple for me.
Right.
They certainly weren't simple for Mr. Williams at that moment. And I think my dad wanted me to connect with that. And so that's the long answer to your question.
What a gift. What an incredible gift. Well, it clearly formed you, and I know we're going to get into more of that, which is really wonderful. I loved the story, and I know I'm referencing the book that you have written now, and that there's another one in the works. But in Descent into Love, you mentioned attending a college at Wake Forest, an African American church, with the maid who cleaned your dorm. I just think that's absolutely beautiful. How how did that come about, and how did that experience shape how you understood ideas like justice and belonging and faith?
Well, it was I felt very privileged that she would pick me up on Sunday mornings and take me into her community. And it was a profound experience because I had grown up in the church in a white church.
Right.
And my church was part of the dominant culture.
Right.
And here, she picked me up. It took me to a celebration that was not part of the dominant culture.
Right.
Historically very marginalized. And yet, here's something I'll remember to this day. There was more celebration and joy in that church service than I had ever experienced in any service in my life. So
Wow.
here I was in a community of people who had suffered, once again, in ways unimaginable to me, had been
Yes.
marginalized in ways that I had not experienced. And yet I touched a joy and a celebration there that I had never touched before in any other worship service. So I think that was left me wanting to know, what is all that? What makes that possible? What makes that possible? Years later, my longtime mentor, as he was aging and approaching his own death, he said to me, it's not enough just to accept the diminishments that come with aging. You must accept them and be joyful. And so that's a challenge for me.
Yes.
I would like to I would like to feel the pain and then kind of stay stuck in it. But I think real mentors challenge us to feel the pain and find joy in life.
Yes. Yes. Wow. What wise words. Really wise words. Well, that's extraordinary. What a gift to have that experience while you're still in that age where you're so malleable and you're so open to those sorts of things that will ultimately resonate throughout your life. And I know that this is going to resonate throughout the stories that you're sharing here, including joining something called the Journeyman program, which was the first time I had heard of this. So I'm excited to know of this. You were sent not somewhere easy, but to Tel Aviv. Your family must have thought that was quite something, and you must have as well. So what drew you to that work following college? And then what were your first impressions as you started to do your work there?
Well, we had when you applied for this program, you got to list 3 places in the world that you wanted to go. And that was my first choice. I wanted to go to the Middle East. And the program was designed to send people right out of college as volunteers to support some work that was already taking place in the country.
Okay.
So in this case, what I did was I lived in a dormitory with high school students whose parents were primarily doctors and nurses in the Gaza Strip.
Wow.
And some of their parents worked in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. But I lived in a dormitory with them near the only American school in the country, so that these high school students could go to school. So I was there supporting their parents, really, who were doing
Wow.
this work in truly amazing work.
Right. That's incredible. And not a peaceful place then anymore maybe than it is now. So charged in many, many different ways. And you talk about at one point, and this is, Killian, really extraordinary, I have to say. It represents your heart, I think, in such an incredible way, in a way that I think all of us must. I know I want to learn from you. But you were at a falafel stand one day, and you were turning away from that falafel stand, I assume with some delicious falafel, when suddenly there is a grenade that explodes and you see a body hurtle by. And in your journal, you write, "If I am capable of such profound hatred, am I not also capable of more profound love than I have ever experienced?" Could you talk a little bit about that? That's truly extraordinary.
Well, as you know, there has been so much violence and hatred on both sides of that conflict
Yes.
um, for generations.
Yes.
And we know that the only thing I know, it's so complicated, but the only thing I know for sure, and this is, I don't know anyone who would disagree with this, is that the violence has not led to peace. It is
Yes.
violence begets violence. And so
Yes.
to see, and I think that was the first time I had ever seen an act of violence where someone's body literally, a dead body literally flies by me. So it was striking. I think I feel the same way today as I did then, that it was a reminder of what we human beings are capable of doing to other human beings.
Yes.
And it made me feel like I, as a human being, am capable of having thrown that grenade and having
Yes.
killed those people. Therefore, I better take this spiritual journey seriously and practice, or at least try to learn to live from a deeper place, a place of love, a place of forgiveness, a place where I can become a peacemaker. So it was more just like a wake up call. This is serious. This is
Yes.
serious work, this inner work that we are
Yes.
called to. That's more what it was, and what it still is for me. A wake up call that every single day we as human beings can hurt out of our hurt, or we can dig deeper to a place of
Yes.
forgiveness. And it is not an easy path.
No.
The place of love and the path of love and forgiveness is not an easy path.
Such really exquisite understanding of yourself that every one of us is capable of so much darkness and of so much light. I don't know that very many people are aware of that or would admit that. That's wisdom for us, Killian.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful. This isn't for anyone. I'm grateful.
Good. Well, so starting to talk a little bit about your work that you have been doing now for a very long time. You wrote in Descent into Love about the importance of planting ourselves in the soil of community. So as you realized the importance of this deep internal work, as you realized how important this hard work of living into love and forgiveness is, what does that mean to plant ourselves, and what did it mean for you to plant yourself in the soil of community? And how did that then end up shaping the work that you would do?
Well, it seems so obvious that, but maybe it's not obvious, but it seems so obvious that we can't do anything of lasting value on our own.
Yes.
And so we need a handful of others. And I think a lot of people think of community as just a, in more like a social a kind of belonging socially. And
Sure.
I don't know that, although I'm nothing against belonging socially, I don't think that's the kind of community that makes possible the kind of transformation that the world needs. I think
Yes.
it's got a little bit, a little more teeth to it. And
A little more grit, we say over here, Killian.
I have a little more grit. I think that we need some place that will hold us to who we say we want to become and to
Yes.
how we say we want to live in this world and the contribution that we say we want to make. And this may be too long a story, but when I was in my 20s, I was in my first small group in the Church of the Savior because the small group was a really important structure of loving accountability. And so I was in my early 20s, and there was a man in my small group who was a very respected math teacher. And he was about 50 years old, and which at the time I thought was really old. And he shared in our small group, I need to tell you that I am attracted to another woman who is not my wife at the school. And I just need to tell you that. And he said, what do you, my small group, what can you do to hold me accountable to my marriage? I mean, he's
Wow.
me like in my 20s. I, again, have no idea. And our group kind of batted the idea around a little and then said, well, how about if you promise us you will never be alone with this other teacher? I can do that. What we watched, that simple act of allowing himself to be deeply known and asking to be held accountable to who he said he wanted to be.
Yes.
That simple kind of loving accountability prevented his family from breaking up, his marriage from breaking up. It had incredible consequences. Maybe prevented the other teacher's family from breaking up. Who knows?
Yes. Yes.
All it was an intentional small group of allowing himself to be deeply known and held accountable to who he said he wanted to become. And so that it was that experience that I wanted to bring to the work of Samaritan Ends, which we started in DC, and then later to the work of Recovery Cafe, that we all need that kind of loving accountability in our lives.
Yes, yes. I want to go more deeply into that. This might be a little bit of a tangent, but I think it will also continue on in this chain of thought, because one of the reflections that you make in Descent into Love, which I thought was a really important one. There's so much in our world where you hear things like "look within yourself" and "find yourself," and it's all about you. and there's something about that to me that always rings untrue. You know, I think you put this so well that in planting ourselves in the soil of community, showing up daily, healing and justice can flow through us, but is not from us and is certainly not about us. And it seems to me that although we do need to be very self-aware, and you were aware enough to actually believe that you heard God's direction given to you. It's a fine line that I think a lot of people and organizations struggle with. And how do we say on the right side of that line, being self-aware so that we can be aware of what is being taught maybe to us or through us, but not making it about us?
Well, that's a great question. I think the way I would try to make sense of that is that if we are going deeper on this journey and discovering what breaks our heart, what need in the world do we want to respond to, then the other side of the coin is connecting with that need in the world. And once you start connecting with the real need in the world, it can no longer, it takes you out of it all being about your own self-actualization.
Yes. Yes.
At the point that you are connecting with some authentic need in the world.
Yes. I love that.
I think that saves us from it all being about us.
Yes.
It brings us to our knees in humility, because the people that we meet along the way with such courage and grit that are facing things that, again, I've said it a couple of times in this one conversation, but things that are truly unimaginable to some of us.
Right.
And yet they're facing it with such courage and grit.
I just read recently, Killian, and I feel like this would resonate very much with you. This was in a book called Transcend by Scott Barry Kaufman, who's working at University of Pennsylvania. And he looks at Maslow and what is a very, very well established pyramid of the hierarchy of needs. And apparently that pyramid appears nowhere in Maslow's writing. Now, the concepts do appear, but what's most important about that is that how we understand things, because it's been drawn out in a pyramid, is that this self-actualization is at the top. And so we think in all of our modern psychology today that it's all about us and it's all about self-actualization. And what he says is the last 2 years of Maslow's work were actually completely contrary to how we interpret that pyramid. And that work is that you have to transcend the self in order to find the self. That you cannot reach self-actualization unless you are aiming beyond the self. And I just think that is such a powerful idea. And it's one that we have got all wrong in our society, our community, our culture, our understandings. But one that you do understand. You do understand that.
Well, I thank you for sharing that, that Maslow. I think of that hierarchy of needs a lot, because we had this one board member who asked us early on. She said, when Starbucks gave us this beautiful espresso machine, one of our board members said, "Where does an espresso machine fit on Maslow's hierarchy of needs?" So I think about Maslow a lot and laugh about that. And what she did was give me an opportunity to share that when someone walks into any of our cafes and they have been beaten down by, trauma, maybe from the earliest days of their lives, and then the results of trauma, which, substance use disorder or homelessness or mental health challenges, and someone says to them, "Let me make you a special coffee drink exactly the way you want it." And I explained to her, that is communion.
Wow,
and
beautiful.
She said, I see where that fits now on that hierarchy of needs.
That's beautiful. And that's a wonderful seg into, there's no way to go through all of the steps of your incredible journey. People will have to read the book. But when you moved to Seattle, you formed something called the New Creation Community, another group that sounds like of accountability and of practice together, and ultimately founded the Recovery Cafe. So talk about that founding of the Recovery Cafe that has now is something that graces many, many places across the country.
Well, it was based on the notion that of the inward-outward journey, that if we go inward and take that inward journey seriously enough, we will discover not only what breaks our heart about what's
Yes.
going on around us, but we'll discover what brings us joy also. And then when we begin to express that in the world by connecting with some need in the world, we discover our call. We discover how we are to give our lives. And
Yes.
I think that's what happened with this small group, that we were part of this small group, the new creation community. Everyone needed to be part of one small group. And our little small group began to feel that what broke our hearts into was the fact that people were trapped by their mental health challenge or their addiction or their homelessness, and no way to break free, no place to come to know that they were precious and loved. And so we
Yes.
began to dream about what that would look like in Seattle. I
Right.
had been a part of a group doing that work, that kind of work with people suffering in those ways in DC. But
Right.
we began to ask, what would that look like in Seattle?
Right.
And that, of course, depended on so many things. What were other expressions of healing already taking place? We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and it also depended on what would be the right thing in this Seattle culture. And so,
Right.
so a coffee, a cafe, was an easy choice.
If you've been asking yourself, what's the point of all of this? Not just in your job, but in your life, you're not alone. Most high achievers I work with aren't lacking drive. They're lacking direction that actually matters. That's why I built Leading with Purpose at the Grit Institute. It's a step-by-step path to reconnect with what drives you, leads you, and sustains you, especially when things get hard. If you're tired of just checking boxes and you're ready to lead with intention, go to thegritinstitute.com/purpose/ and start Leading with Purpose today.
It's beautiful. I just think it's beautiful. And I know that you've talked about the coffee machine from Starbucks, and I know in the book as well, you are really committing yourself to a place that is beautiful, welcoming and beautiful, and make sure that everybody understands that they deserve that beauty and they deserve that welcome and that love.
Sure, definitely. Beauty's a big part of healing. Every healing journey, that we send big flowers to people in the hospital because
Yes.
we know that beauty is a part of healing.
That's wonderful. I don't think I've ever heard that said quite so succinctly and beautifully. It's wonderful. And it's a good reminder as well. I think sometimes we make excuses for why things don't need to be. And there's always an opportunity to make it a beautiful offering. That's great. So coming back, as you developed Recovery Cafe and as you have run Recovery Cafe now for years, and they have continued to grow into all around the United States, coming back to the idea of accountability and personal accountability and community accountability, one of the things that I hear again and again from employers is how difficult accountability is now, because people believe that love means that anything goes or that everything is okay. And that's of course not what it means, but there's a pretty widespread misunderstanding of that. So how do you continue to build accountability into loving practice while you're running an organization, and now you're running an organization across the country?
Well, the same principle of we all need a place to be deeply known
Yes.
and loved, and that's what accountability comes from. It doesn't,
Yes.
it's not a punitive thing. It
Right.
comes from being deeply known. And so
Yes.
all of our staff members, and by the way, we have an executive director. We have two executive directors now, one running the network, which is our training arm of our work,
Sure.
and one running the Seattle cafes. But we have three different teams that meet with each other once a week, not just for business, although we do business together. But first and foremost, the meeting is about connection and being and allowing ourselves to be known by our teammates, which is a very countercultural idea.
Yes.
As you well know, because people at work don't want to be vulnerable. They want to be the best or perceived as the best. And so it's a very countercultural thing we do every week by gathering with a small group of others who we work with and sharing. I would say, I often tell people, share at least to the point of a little discomfort.
Right.
To at least to the point of a little discomfort, and not just what our social media world tells us to share, and that is all the reasons why my life is better than yours.
Right. Yes.
So I would say first and foremost, we on our teams are committed to that. And everyone knows when they're in the hiring process that is one of our practices. If they don't want to work for a place that encourages vulnerability among the staff, then they really shouldn't take this job.
Sure.
But I won't pretend that makes everything easy. There are other practices that are really important in accountability among a staff.
Sure.
And I think one practice, and this may sound, archaic, but I do think one practice I would say to anyone starting a nonprofit organization, don't be afraid to put some things in writing. If a person is struggling to meet, to perform at their best, which is ultimately not only what the org needs, it's what they need.
Yes.
People are happier when they're doing their best,
Yes.
So don't be afraid to put in writing along the way. Here's some things I'd like, some suggestions I'd like to make. And I'm putting them in writing just because in this moment, in this conversation, your eyes may roll into the back of your head. But later, you might be able to sit with that paper and reflect on is there any wisdom in this for me?
Yes.
Secondly, about loving accountability, I think it's not something that is done to other people. It's something done together. So
Wonderful.
I think it's really important in this nonprofit world to sit and listen to people and ask, what would help you be your best in this country?
Yes.
What have we not thought of that you've thought of? It's not me doing to you. It's us figuring this out together.
Yes.
For the sake of the whole.
Right.
Even that, when I say it, it sounds really simplistic, but it is not. It is not simplistic. because
Very difficult.
because we all have blind spots about our own behaviors. We all do. And maybe the
Yes.
most egregious behaviors are the ones we're the most blind about because it would be
Yes,
to see them. So
that's right.
it's not simple, this loving accountability. I guess the final thing, and this is maybe going on longer than you wanted on this question.
No.
But the final thing is, I would say we tend to watch in nonprofits or in businesses, we tend to watch for things that are not getting done or things that are being done but not at a certain quality of excellence. And we watch for those things like hawks. But I think the thing we really need to watch for, like hawks, is attitudes and toxicity.
Yes.
Because that could take down an org faster than any poor performing task or task that hasn't been performed at its best.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. So what would you say to somebody struggling with that in their org? Because that's a really hard thing. And sometimes hard to identify, sometimes not at all hard to identify, but hard to do something about.
Very hard to do something about. Again, for that reason that where we are most toxic may be the very place we can't see.
Yes.
It's that's why it's so difficult. I read an article, maybe you read it as well, that 61% of employees in businesses across the U.S., I believe the article was about the U.S., 61% of employees distrust the leadership.
Yes.
Because we live in a time of massive distrust.
Yes.
We call our news fake news. We live in, and I'm not just talking about one side or the other of the political fight. There is massive distrust on both sides of the political divide and directed toward leadership. There are no easy answers to how to be an alternative organization that embodies an alternative in this culture of distrust. No easy answers, but I would, if I had to give a simple, if you forced me to give a simple answer, I would say, listen, listen, listen. And be, as if you are the leader of that org, be transparent yourself.
Right.
The more you are distrusted, the more you feel like, protecting yourself.
True.
But listen and be transparent yourself.
Excellent advice. You know what was interesting when I was researching for the Grit Factor and I was talking to generals and admirals and high performing military leaders in the case of the Grit Factor, the thing that came out again and again is just what you said. Not that tactics were the most important or proficiency, because they've already proven all of that, but that it was the art and science of active listening. That was the most important leadership skill, bar none. Nothing even comes close. So you're right on target with all the generals and admirals, Killian. No surprise at all.
No, that's very good to know. So I'm going to work at being a better listener. But even so, it is very hard. It's a hard time to be a leader of any kind of organization.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go back to a quote that you shared by a mentor of yours, Gordon Cosby, who once said, "Some people, out of their need for control, hold their call too tightly and risk smothering it to death. But your temptation is to give away your spiritual authority too quickly out of fear of being overwhelmed and out of a desire to be inclusive. This really resonates in watching different leaders in different organizations, different clients, different people that I've been talking to over the years. This challenge of ensuring that consistency of effort, but also wanting to be inclusive. How do you manage that? How do you balance that?
Well, I think what I meant in that particular quote was I wanted to be collaborative. I wanted everyone to know that their voice mattered. And so I would bend over backwards to the point of maybe giving away my authority
Right.
to someone who maybe had no intention of even being at the org for more than 6 months. You know,
Sure.
there was not wisdom in that. He saw it from he saw things, and I was able to hear from him things that he saw that are still helpful to me, even though he's been dead 10 years. I still hear his voice saying, and here's what I would add to that. When you give someone authority for something before it becomes their call, really, truly their call.
Sure.
That could be actually a form of violence to their spirit.
Oh, interesting.
So at first it was, I just want to be collaborative. I want everyone to feel that they have I want everyone to feel they're as invested in this as I am. Well, it's simply not true that everyone is as invested as I am.
Right.
And now that many people are, and many people have been raised up into leadership roles because of that investment. But to give someone authority, 6 months in or a year in, who has maybe for them it's just a job.
Sure.
But
Sure.
you risk losing the whole shebang.
That is wisdom hard earned, I think. So some hard earned. It's good. One of the things that I also really took from your book that is the story of Recovery Cafe, and now, of course, that story has continued to expand, is this cloud of witnesses that you have hanging on the wall guiding you and your community. And you share that you have Gandhi and you have Chief Seattle and Mother Teresa and many others. What is the significance for you and for Recovery Cafe, or the work that you do as an organization, as well as your own personal work, to not just honor those who have come before, but also really look up to these role models in how it is that we guide our work?
Well, I think this could apply to so many parts of our lives, but we need to see things embodied.
Yes.
So you could talk about the practice of forgiveness all day long, but then you see a picture of Desmond Tutu, who embodied forgiveness.
Yes.
Then you get it.
Yes.
I think that's why the cloud of witnesses are so important. So these are the people on our walls who embodied the qualities that we want to embody in this community.
Yes.
They embodied those qualities. And so when we see them on the wall, it's just a great reminder of who we want to be as a community.
It's wonderful. It's so much more powerful than simply listing, which is also important, but simply listing values and guiding values, which are very important. But I love that idea that we need to see that embodied to be able to really follow that, to be able to look up to that.
Yes, definitely.
Wonderful. No, that's wonderful. As I think about your work with Recovery Cafe and before and beyond, and other mission-driven leadership, there is this balance of control and surrender. And it's such a difficult balance. How have you navigated that as you have grown and continued to work in this space?
You mean in the workspace itself, or in your own inner work?
Oh, that's a great question because they're both quite relevant. I would may whichever one speaks to you more.
Well, I'm not sure I have any real. We in our work, we have to surrender pretty much on a daily basis to someone we love making a decision for their life that we wouldn't have made for them. That is a
Yes.
really painful daily practice of surrender. And just an example of that is a person in our community who relapsed, who we have invited. We always invite, come back, come back, come back. This person is not ready to come back.
Right.
And it requires a daily surrender to what we cannot control. Cannot control the decision this person is making for their life in this moment.
Yes.
It's really painful. It's
Yes.
really, I think that same practice of surrender to what we cannot control is part of our just spiritual inner work as well.
Yes.
You know, we say in the 12 steps, you can't control people, places, or things. So you pretty much really can't control anything. But some things are more painful. The knowledge that you can't control this.
Yes.
Some things are more painful than others to not be able to control. It doesn't mean that we can't do something.
Yes.
And that's where I think a lot of people throw up their hands and say, I can't control the lack of affordable housing. And
Sure.
I can't control the fact that people are dying of overdoses. And I can't control the many different groups of people who are being left out of what they really need to thrive. And so it's tempting to just throw up our hands and say, I can't control it. And I think we have to really be careful of that, because even though we can't control, it doesn't mean we do nothing.
That's really important to hear today, I think, and this time that we're living. Thank you. That's an excellent reminder.
I often say to people, find one place locally and maybe one place internationally where you will offer your life and your gifts and your influence, whatever it is. You may not be able to control that situation, but whatever influence you have, you can offer it in those two places.
Yes.
And now I've gotten to where I say in recent weeks, I've said, find two places and maybe they both better be here in the U.S.
That's great. That's good.
We need their influence, someone.
We do. Absolutely. That's right. Well, so, and with the idea of taking one step as we come up to an end here, for the listeners that want to engage with this work, whether it's in recovery or leadership or social change, what is a practical step that they could take today?
Well, it would be great to just get to know us. I really don't try to strong arm anybody into volunteering or donating for that matter, because I really do trust people will do that discovery work about what breaks their heart a little bit more
Yes.
than the other needs. Then there are so many needs that are heartbreaking. So I don't really try to strong arm anyone. What I would do is recommend going on the website, recoverycafe.org or recoverycafenetwork.org. We have two different websites. And then if there's further interest, then maybe even visiting one of our recovery cafes. Because again, being present and meeting people whose stories are so possibly so different from your own
Yes.
is what changes us. That's
Yes.
what changes us. And ultimately, that is what changes our world.
That's beautifully put. How do you define success?
Success for me is being on the journey toward freedom from all the things that block our capacity to love.
Wonderful.
It's just being on that journey. It doesn't mean you've arrived on that at the destination of perfect love. It means, to me, success is being on the journey of toward freedom from all the things that block our capacity to love. If I could change one narrative about addiction and recovery, it would be that we, as a nation, have demonized certain kinds of addiction, certain addictions like substance use disorder.
Yes.
And we have celebrated other kinds of addictions, power,
Yes.
money, and the harm that is caused by people addicted to power and greed and money is far outweighs the harm caused by to society at large by a person whose trauma has led to a very painful and destructive use of substances. So I'm not saying that substance use disorder is okay and a good thing. No way I'm saying that. It's painful.
Sure.
And it's almost always a result of trauma. But I am saying we glorify some addictions in our society and demonize others.
That's a really helpful change of perspective that's going to be hard for a lot of people, but really important for us to own up. And in a way, Killian, I think that is what you were able to do when you were so young and you were in Gaza and you said, I'm capable of this kind of hatred and this kind of action. We all need to be able to say, we are capable of this. And in fact, we are doing some of this and take responsibility and then be able to change that behavior in our lives, our perspectives in our lives, and then ideally our actions in the world.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like we have this class at our Seattle Recovery Cafe on forgiveness, and I've listened to people share over and over for years and years about how they are able to forgive incredible wrongs done to them. And
Yes.
and I would say the thing I hear over and over again is that we can finally forgive others when we know deeply our own need for forgiveness.
Yes, that's a very powerful thing. It does take that hard work, and I I know that you say early on in the practices that you have cultivated in your small groups along throughout your life, that deep time for study and for introspection is part of that daily practice that brings you to this place.
We have to take it seriously.
Yes.
As you well know.
Well, I have much to learn from you, Killian. I think we all do. Thank you so much for your generosity and your stories and your heart and your wisdom. It's absolutely invaluable. I don't think there's anything more important.
Well, Shannon, you embody those same values and that same love and that same light. And so I feel blessed to have had this hour with you.
If you have a moment, please make sure that you've subscribed, forward this to a friend, and drop in a review. It makes a big difference to the success of the show and helps others find it.